It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. Attack and counter-attack. Hezbollah launches hundreds of rockets towards Israel in response to dozens of airstrikes on targets in southern Lebanon.
Cities in the north of Israel are abandoned. They are ghost cities. No one can live there because they're under fire.
One Israeli soldier is killed, but Hezbollah claims only to have hit military targets, with both sides wanting to avoid all-out war. A former British soldier working for the Reuters news agency has been killed in Ukraine after a hotel was hit by a Russian missile. Also tonight, things will get worse before they get better. The warning we'll hear in the Prime Minister's first big speech since taking office. Taking adventure to new heights, the 102-year-old war veteran breaking records with a 13,000 feet skydive. Plus, is an Oasis reunion finally happening? Definitely, maybe. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview at 10:30. Good evening. Escalation must be avoided at all costs. That's the stark warning from the Foreign Secretary and the UN General Secretary, amongst many others, following a day of strikes and counterstrikes between Hezbollah and Israel. Diplomatic efforts are underway to contain the conflict after Israeli airstrikes on dozens of targets in southern Lebanon. For its part, Hezbollah claimed to have launched more than 320 rockets at Israel in retaliation for the assassination of one of its commanders last month. Our international correspondent Alex Rossi reports on another fraught day for relations in the Middle East.
The Israeli preemptive strike came in the early hours. Huge explosions rupturing the morning quiet across southern Lebanon. The IDF says this attack was an act of self-defense and was the result of precise intelligence that Hezbollah was about to launch a retaliatory assault following the assassination of their top commander in Beirut in late July. The targets were missiles and rocket launchers, with Israel saying it had neutralized the worst. But this is unlikely to be the end of the matter.
What happened today is not the end of the story. Hezbollah tried to attack the state of Israel with rockets and drones early in the morning. We instructed the IDF to carry out a powerful preemptive strike to remove the threat. The IDF destroyed thousands of short-range rockets, and they were all intended to harm our citizens and our forces in Galilee.
Hezbollah, for its part, says it did manage to launch hundreds of missiles and rockets at nearly a dozen Israeli military bases, releasing this video complete with triumphant music. In the north, families and their pets were woken to the sounds of war as the country's Iron Dome defense system blasted the fire out of the sky. For this assault, the militant group is also claiming victory.
We were ready after the funeral of Commander Mohsen. Our fighters, our weapons, our plan, everything. We just had some details of which targets we will hit, which I will talk about later. But we are ready.
The cross-border exchange of fire has continued throughout the day, albeit at a slower pace. And as you drive through the border areas, it is unnerving. We are just a few kilometers from the Israeli border, and the towns and villages here in southern Lebanon are deserted. They're like ghost towns. Most people have fled to safer areas, as they have too across the border in Israel. Now, people here that are remaining and across the rest of the country are fearful with this latest escalation about what comes next. Is this another step closer to an all-out war between Hezbollah and Israel? Dr. Khaled El-Hajj tells me his family have left for the safety of Beirut. He says what is unfolding now is a catastrophe.
It was a horrible night. We couldn't sleep. It started around 4:45, something like this, and since that time, and we're still awake.
This round of fighting does appear to be over for now, but the threat hanging over the region remains. It feels to many here as though a wider war may not be far away. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Southern Lebanon.
Let's take a look now at how the attacks unfolded in more detail with our military analyst Sean Bell.
Although both Israel and Hezbollah provide different accounts of what occurred in the early hours of this morning, the Israeli Defense Force claimed that Hezbollah was preparing to launch thousands of missiles towards Israel, so launched a proactive strike at 04:30 this morning using 100 Israeli jets against 40 targets in southern Lebanon. The Israelis have F-16s shown here, F-15 and F-35 fighters available, using a range of weapons including laser-guided and GPS-guided bombs. In contrast, Hezbollah claims they fired 320 Katyusha rockets, shown here, and drones at 11 military targets in Israel, and that the first phase of their operation was successful. The Israeli strike was clearly based on extensive intelligence, and the scale of the response was a clear demonstration of Israeli military strength. Amid fears of an escalation in the conflict, over the past few weeks, the US has been increasing its military presence in the region. The US has deployed 2 carrier groups into the Middle East, the USS Abraham Lincoln, shown here, and the Theodore Roosevelt, both bristling with fighter jets and cruise missiles. Although we don't know exactly where this capability is operating, it seems likely they would operate from either the Mediterranean or the Arabian Seas. The US has also deployed the USS Georgia, a submarine shown here, armed with up to 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles. Although its exact location will be secret, its payload of cruise missiles would likely be focused on fixed land targets in Iran, so operating in the Arabian Sea could offer strategic benefit. Israel is the dominant military power in the region, so would have been confident at responding to any Hezbollah aggression autonomously. However, the last Iranian attack in April involved 30 cruise missiles and 120 ballistic missiles, and that is where international support for Israel could prove crucial if the conflict does boil over.
Some breaking news now on the situation in the Middle East. Officials in Egypt say ceasefire talks about Gaza have ended without a resolution. Our US correspondent Mark Stone is at the White House now. Mark, given what's happened today, that's not exactly a surprise, but what reaction there?
Well, no specific reaction from the White House on this issue that is just breaking now. You'll recall that mediators have been locked in talks which have been shuttling between Doha and Qatar and in the Egyptian capital, Cairo. Mediators from the United States, from Qatar, talking to the Israelis and to Hamas. These talks have been going on for goodness knows how long now, and they come to apparent agreement, and then, of course, it all breaks down again. In the last few minutes, we're told from Egyptian authorities that the talks have broken down once again, although the US officials speaking on background have said that on the sidelines the talks are still going. But clearly I think what this means is that on the face of it, neither Israel nor Hamas are agreeing to the proposals being put forward by the United States and by Qatar, despite the fact that Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, just a couple of days ago was saying that the Israeli side had indeed agreed to the proposal. So quite apart from this being a disaster, a continued disaster for the people of Gaza and for the hostages, the Israeli hostages still in Gaza, in the context of what you've just been talking about and the northern border and the tension there, this, of course, is bad news for that as well, because it suggests that Hezbollah in the north will continue to attack Israel.
Yeah, Mark, how has the US reacted to that situation between Hezbollah and Israel exchanging fire?
Well, I mean, interestingly, Matt, there hasn't been a great deal of reaction. And I think, just as there hasn't been a huge amount from the Europeans or the Brits either, just short statements, I think that's really because they're just waiting to see what happens next. I think one of two things could happen now. Either there is some sort of a deal in Gaza, a ceasefire deal, a hostage deal in Gaza, which would then allow Hezbollah to say, right, we're going to stop attacking Israel from the north. As I've just explained, I think that's very unlikely. If it does happen, then all that would mean is that you get in essence, the pre-October the 7th status quo in the north, with a sort of tentative ceasefire between Lebanese Hezbollah and the Israelis. So that's one option. The other option is no ceasefire, which is looking, unfortunately, rather likely. And then these exchanges of fire on the northern border continue, and as a consequence of that, potentially, there is a miscalculation, a large loss of life on one side or the other, and then the whole thing spirals. So, I mean, an unbelievably uncomfortable game of brinkmanship continues here. And the last thing I would say, Matt, is that right now, from an American perspective, given that the US election is only, 10 weeks away, every decision that the Americans either make or don't make, consciously make or consciously don't make, is a decision that is framed around the US election, which is not a very conducive, not a very good way to conduct geopolitics.
Mark, indeed, thank you very much for that. Some more breaking news for you this evening as well. The Reuters news agency has confirmed that a British citizen working for them in Ukraine has been found dead under the rubble a day after a Russian missile hit a hotel in the eastern Ukrainian city of Kramatorsk. Ryan Evans was a former British soldier. He was 38 and working as a safety advisor for Reuters. 6 other people were wounded in the blast, among them several journalists. Kramatorsk serves as a base often for international reporters and volunteers. Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Zelensky says his forces have now advanced a further 3 kilometres into the Russian region of Kursk, taking control of 2 more settlements there. Kyiv has also warned Belarus is concentrating a significant number of troops and military equipment along its border with northern Ukraine. German prosecutors have named and charged a man suspected of killing 3 people and injuring 8 others in a knife attack at a festival in Solingen. Issa al-H is a Syrian national and charged with 3 counts of murder, attempted murder and 8 cases of dangerous bodily harm. Here, Metropolitan Police say a man in his 20s has been stabbed at the Notting Hill Carnival. His injuries are not life-threatening, and police say they'll be using greater search powers to find suspects. So far, officers have made 38 arrests and recovered 4 knives at the West London event. Sir Keir Starmer will use his first major speech since becoming Prime Minister to warn the country things will only get better after they get worse. He's expected to criticise the Conservatives for the condition they left the country in. But some within his own party have questioned why a Labour government can't offer a more positive message. Here's our political correspondent, Darren McCaffrey.
Just over 50 days since Keir Starmer entered Downing Street to optimistic cheers that things could only get better, this week in his first keynote speech, he's going to strike a very different tone. The Prime Minister will claim that things are worse than we ever imagined. We've inherited not just an economic black hole, but a societal black hole. Frankly, things will get worse before we get better. And it is a message that has been carefully choreographed, with cabinet ministers already trailing the speech in front of the cameras today.
He's going to say the country faces major challenges and they're not going to be solved overnight. And that's a departure from some of the snake oil that's been sold to people in recent years. But we are making change.
So Keir Starmer's speech is directly out of the expectation management playbook, both trying to buy some crucial time with voters, while also hoping to ingrain that message that they've inherited a mess. So if there are any improvements, it is Labour that will reap the political rewards. It is unsurprisingly something senior Conservatives don't accept.
Today, employment is strong, inflation is falling, financial stability has returned. this narrative that Labour are continuing to press, that somehow all the woes that that we're now experiencing are because of just 14 years of mishap and ill decisions. It is simply wrong.
And voters in sunny Surrey largely thought it was a sensible approach.
That's a political thing that they all say, to be fair, when a new government takes over. They blame the previous government, so that's nothing new there.
Good luck to him. I think whoever's in Parliament, whoever the Prime Minister is, it's a difficult job.
Well, I think I'd much rather use realistic and honest than unrealistic and dishonest. I think in the past we've had too much of the latter and not enough of the former.
Winning in politics is not just about dealing with big problems, it's also about framing narratives. The Prime Minister is hoping that his speech on Tuesday will not just set the scene for this week, but will be remembered for voters for many years to come.
Darren joins me now live from Downing Street. We heard from Pat McFadden in your piece there, Darren. What we didn't hear was him having to rebut suggestions that a big Labour donor somehow got a pass to Downing Street as a result.
Yeah, indeed. There's been a bit of controversy this weekend about Lord Ali. As you say, a big Labour donor, also a Labour peer, it must be said, as well. But he has donated money to the party, to Keir Starmer himself, and also, according to the Telegraph tonight, to Sue Gray's son. But he had a pass to Downing Street, which is pretty unusual for a peer to have. And we know that he did have some political gatherings, we believe, in the Rose Garden behind me during the month of July, in which he was thanking, if you like, Labour staff and members and supporters who had helped Labour win that election campaign. Now, it must be said, Labour are tonight denying that any rules were broken. They insist the pass was handed back at the end of July. And as you said, Pat McFadden told Sky News earlier on today that it's due to expire at the end of August. But the very fact that Labour have had to issue a statement, I think, is a sign, as I say, they are feeling a bit defensive, if you like, about why he had a pass, and they're not really able to explain why he was given one or indeed who authorised it. It's definitely a story worth watching in the days ahead. Another one, of course, story worth watching is reflected in my report tonight, Keir Starmer's big keynote speech on Tuesday. We're learning a little more this evening about what the Prime Minister is going to say, Matt, and that includes apparently that he's going to need 10 years, a decade, to rebuild Britain, and that the Prime Minister is going to prepare the public, according to the front page of the Times tomorrow, for potentially unpopular decisions such as tax rises by blaming the ruin and rubble left by the Conservative Party. Certainly setting the tone, I think, as Parliament reconvenes in just over a week's time. That speech due to take place here in Downing Street on Tuesday.
Darren, thanks very much. A question: how young is too young for a child to go travelling abroad without an adult? The TV presenter Kirsty Allsop has revealed she's been contacted by social services after letting her 15-year-old son go travelling around Europe with a 16-year-old friend. Kensington and Chelsea Council says safeguarding children is an absolute priority, as Sky's Becky Johnson reports.
Should Kirsty Allsop have allowed her 15-year-old son to go interrailing around Europe? It sparked a fierce public debate since the TV presenter revealed she let him go travelling for 3 weeks with a 16-year-old friend this summer. Days later, he turned 16 and she posted this video of him on his birthday, thanking people for kind and supportive messages. But she's now revealed she's been contacted by a social worker from her local council, Kensington and Chelsea, who asked her what safeguards she'd put in place for her son's travel. She said she felt sick and incandescent and believes it was sparked by a malicious report to social services. Taking to Instagram, she's doubled down, ending a lengthy post saying, "I hope the silver lining to this cloud is that everyone stops and thinks about the freedoms we had as children and ask what harm could be done not by the freedoms, but by the restrictions and fears we're imposing on our kids." But parents have taken different views on her decision.
I think it depends on the maturity, but I would go for 18. 18 is the right age.
At that particular age, they're quite vulnerable still, and the world is quite, dangerous, really. with the age of internet. And so, yeah, I'll personally say that no.
It's prompted questions. Do social services have any grounds for an investigation? And could allowing a 15-year-old to go travelling amount to neglect?
There is no law that says what age you can be, other than buying the ticket price that might be an age on it. However, the law of this land says you've got all of those freedoms. But if something happens, then the law may take another look and may challenge those decisions at a later date.
A Kensington and Chelsea Council spokesperson said safeguarding children is an absolute priority. We take any referral we receive very seriously, and we have a statutory responsibility for children under 18 years of age. Kirsty Alsop says she believes her son's trip was inspiring, adding the call from social services has been a huge shock. Becky Johnson, Sky News.
Now, someone who isn't, who is not too old is our next story. A World War II veteran has marked her 102nd birthday in style and proves she's still got a head for heights. Minette Bailey was herself married to a paratrooper, so celebrated with a skydive in Suffolk. Sky's Lisa Dowd was there too.
She was only ever going to do this once. So they made sure that everything was perfect. And then they went for it. With East Anglia 13,000 feet beneath her. Minette Bailey is still pushing herself to do more, even at 102. The Second World War veteran made history as the oldest person in Britain to skydive.
There we go! Good job, how was that?
Oh, that was wonderful. I was glad when we got to the top, and when the door opened, I thought there's nothing more I can do or say, it's just jump. I shut my eyes. We seemed to travel at a very fast speed until he pulled the parachute. And then I opened my eyes and began to enjoy it all.
Minette served in the Women's Royal Naval Service, known as the Wrens, and has always loved a challenge. Last year, she reached 130 miles an hour in a Ferrari at Silverstone. Family and friends watched as she completed her jump for charity.
She's such an inspiration, and it just shows that age is just a number.
We're so proud of her in the village, and everybody loves her to pieces.
She's not sure how she'll top this for her 103rd birthday, but what she has said is that she won't be jumping out of a plane ever again. Lisa Dowd, Sky News.
Yeah, I don't blame her. Finally, some might say Oasis are set for a reunion next summer to play a series of gigs in London and Manchester. And former frontman Liam Gallagher has done nothing to dispel those rumours. The Britpop icons last played together 15 years ago now, before Noel Gallagher walked out on his brother and his band. But Liam has added to speculation they could reunite to play a series of shows at Wembley and Heaton Park in Manchester next year, with a tweet simply saying, "I never did like that word former." OK, let's get all the day's sports news now. Here's Louise.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Who's going to win the league this year? Jamie?
Man City.
And Gary?
Arsenal.
OK. You said the same last year.
I did.
What makes you convinced, again, that they can pip City to the top spot?
I mean, my reasoning last year was coming off the back of the treble for City, thinking that might have an impact on them at certain points in the season, the demands, expectation, maybe the injuries, the games they played, but they're unbelievable. To do what they did, I think they won the last 9 games, didn't they, which is just special. And Arsenal had the most incredible season, so I wasn't a million miles away. They're just getting better.
Points away. Yeah,
they're getting nearer. And I don't know, I feel they'll do it. I feel they'll do it at a certain point. And look, you can never write. He could 100% be right because of what Pep Guardiola does. He wins all the time. But I feel that Arsenal are getting so close and they're so consistent that this could be the year.
Are you becoming less certain about Manchester City?
No. I mean, they go to Chelsea yesterday. I mean, whatever we talk about Chelsea, it's still Stamford Bridge. They've still got big name players. Arsenal are obviously one of the top teams in the country. But in the last couple of years, when they've gone for the league, I think I'm right in saying that they've gone out of the domestic cups quite early and haven't got to like a final or a semi-final in Europe. And I think this group of players are good enough to they should be getting to the semis of the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup and attacking all the competitions the way Man City do and Liverpool did in the past under Jurgen Klopp. Because I don't think it's acceptable now for a team this good not to win a trophy this season.
I'm not sure I'm in agreement with that. Do you not see the similarities between the journey that Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool went on, where they felt like they were just getting there and eventually they got them? Do you not feel like there's a little bit of that same sort of...
Yeah, but my point being is, though, Liverpool was still attacking. Liverpool won the Champions League before they won the league.
Look, forget the trophy bit. I'm talking about the league
Yeah,
journey.
I get that, but the point I'm trying to make is City is still going like further in competitions. Arsenal should be doing that, and I think that will take a little bit out of them than maybe what we see in the league.
Could you see, Gary, Arsenal doing something spectacular, like Liverpool did ultimately, getting beyond 90, 95 points even?
Well, so Liverpool, to win the league, Liverpool, in the first 27 games before it stopped for COVID, won 26 and drew 1. That's what it took to stop Man City and Pep Guardiola winning the league. You know, they're the standards.
Arsenal are getting to such a high level now of consistency, defensive stability, the way in which the balance of the team, they look like they've got a great spirit.
Any buts there?
There's always injuries to the, I suppose, key players, but that's the same for City. Always injuries is the one thing I would say. Last season they were pretty stable all the way through, as City were as well.
And I believe there's been a late change this evening.
By who?
Not you.
What's happened?
Do you know something? This is supposed to be a sort of like an unannounced private sort of ballot. You know what I mean? Where does this sort of leak of information come from, Dave?
Well, my producer.
You've gone for Chelsea.
So you've you've got a great squad. Chelsea.
You've absolutely tore the back out of them in the first hour.
No, I did not.
So
I actually said I thought they could have a good season. I'm saying there's some bizarre things that happen.
There's actually quite a lot to deal with in this. Because so we're going after
I think there's actually a lot to deal with on his side, actually.
But let me just talk about the 4th place one first, because I'm giving away secrets here. Gary had Spurs in there.
You've changed just on tonight.
True or false?
No, do you know I changed? I wasn't sure earlier on today, to be honest with you, about
it. You picked Spurs?
I wasn't sure, though.
Go on.
And I think, I said, look, Tottenham, I hope Tottenham finish 4th. I think they play great football. What I would say is that when the subs came on tonight, I thought that could be a problem for them. Chelsea could easily be an absolute mess, because they could be.
Who's got the better?
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Thanks, Louise. That was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, I am joined by James Rampton, columnist at The Independent, and writer and broadcaster Esther Kraku. And among the stories we'll be talking about, this on the front page of The Independent, about tonight's top story here on Sky News as well. Its headline, Israel tells Hezbollah this is not the end as the conflict intensifies. We'll be right back.
There is a lot of gas being fired all around us. It is an absolute carnival kind of atmosphere out here for Prime Minister Modi's decisive victory. These students are defying the prohibitory orders, and now they're going to be arrested. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. What is feared that over 200 people might have died because of these landslides. This on any given day would have been bustling with people, but today it's absolutely deserted. This is one of the most sensitive areas of northeast Delhi where there's been clashes. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories this evening. Israel launches preemptive strikes towards southern Lebanon, claiming to have identified a huge planned attack by Hezbollah. Ryan Evans, a former British soldier who was working for Reuters in Ukraine, has been found dead under the rubble a day after a Russian missile hit a hotel in the city of Kramatorsk. So Keir Starmer is to give his first big speech this week since he became PM, with a warning that things will get worse before they get better. You are watching the press preview. It's a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with James Rampton, columnist at The Independent, and writer and broadcaster Esther Kreku. So let's see what is on some of those front pages and the renewed strikes by both sides in the conflict between Hezbollah and Israel is the top story in The Guardian tomorrow. Likewise, James's paper, the online-only Independent, says Israel has warned Hezbollah that there will be more airstrikes and that this is not the end. The Express leads with the latest Conservative attack on Labour's decision to axe the winter fuel payment for millions of pensioners. In the Eye, they say the Chancellor's payment cut has split the Cabinet, with some fearing a voter backlash. The Mail returns to the story about Labour donor Lord Wahid Ali being granted a Downing Street pass in what the paper is now labelling a sleaze storm. The growing pressure on Keir Starmer over the issue is also the lead story in The Telegraph. The Financial Times reports that major private equity firms are shying away from investing in China as President Xi exerts tighter controls on businesses there. And the Daily Star teases us with the sort of sights we can all look forward to in the heat wave expected this week. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us and even look at those pictures on front of the Star. As I say, I'm joined by James Rampton, columnist at The Independent, and writer and broadcaster Esther Kraku. Look, we'll get to some of the more frivolous stuff in a bit, but first let's start, James, with your paper, The Independent, and as with many of the papers, it is looking at the situation between Hezbollah and Israel.
These are scary times, and I know journalists are sometimes prone to hyperbole, but I do think it's the highest level of tension we've seen in the region for many years. It's the largest conflict between Israel and Hezbollah since 2006, when there was the famous 34-day war. Many claims and counterclaims about what was destroyed and how many missiles were launched. But the one thing that's beyond debate is that it was a serious escalation last night. I think there are a couple of glimmers of hope. One, that the Hezbollah leader said he thought that might be enough, despite what Netanyahu saying this is not the end. The second glimmer of hope is that I don't know that Netanyahu can sustain a war on different fronts. You know, he may have a lot of resources, but does he have the stamina? Does he have the money? Does he have the will of the people to fight a war on two fronts? We know from history that that's notoriously dangerous. He's also dealing with lots of settler unrest in the West Bank, so there are masses of fires for him to put out. The other huge issue is what America thinks. America has the biggest hold over Israel, pays them, I believe, $5 billion a year in aid. They may well be putting behind-the-scenes pressure on Israel not to escalate, because the catastrophe, the cataclysmic vision would be America drawn into a war with Iran, and that would be something that we would all absolutely be devastated to see.
Yes, although some would say that is already happening given Iran's backing for Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis in Yemen. And actually, it's interesting, as you say, this attack by Hezbollah and Israel is very similar to the attack that came directly from Iran on Israel some weeks back, and both in retaliation for assassinations carried out by Israel. The same story, Esther, on The Guardian as well tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Israel is gambling here. It's a huge gamble. This is not exactly the rhetoric you want to hear. Obviously, the Hezbollah leader tried to draw a line in the sand and say this is enough, because he's facing pressure from Christian leadership in Lebanon to actually take control, to have the Lebanese military take control of southern Lebanon, because they feel like Hezbollah is making the situation worse and escalating tensions. But Israel's strategy of sort of respond and contain is really. It looks more like just respond and not very much containment here. And the question is, you know, one day are we going to wake up and hear that Lebanon has actually declared war on Israel? That's the fear for everyone. One of the things I find interesting is Israel's clear sort of military and technological superiority. I mean, remember in April, Iran fired over 300 rockets into Israel, and only, you know, I think one made it through. Israel fired 2 missiles and it actually landed both times. I think one of them hit a nuclear enrichment site in Iran, which was quite of a wake-up call. So, I mean, other bad actors in the region are looking at this and are also thinking, is this a fight we want to pick? Because Israel's technological superiority is far outweighs all of its enemies at this point. But again, the question is, where is sort of the ability to scale back and to cool the tensions? We don't know. The gamble is the Americans can step in, but if Trump wins in November, actually we might see the opposite of that, because they might be emboldened to take decisive action against their enemies. So we are living in scary times. It's not hyperbolic, unfortunately.
Yes, the technological superiority really refers to Iron Dome, Israel's defence system, and actually some of the imagery we've seen after those rockets were launched by Hezbollah, very similar to, like you say, that Iranian attack. You see Iron Dome working and countering those rockets. James, the story again, I mean, as I said, it's in a lot of the papers, on the front page of the Financial Times tomorrow as well. Here it is. Yes. And again, it features that image of, I think this was actually an Israeli aircraft countering one of those rockets coming in, and they refer there as well, James, to that 34-day war that you mentioned in 2006. I think, look, given its prominence in many papers and similar photographs being used, shows the seriousness of the situation.
Absolutely. A very striking photo, by the way. It captures, you know, the ferocity and the horror of war in one still image. That's so often the case. It can capture it better than moving images. There's a very interesting piece by Julian Borgia inside The Guardian, where he suggests that it may be in Netanyahu's interest to continue the conflict. That is Borgia's view, because if he faces the electorate, he may well be voted out and then would have to face the courts, where he is charged with various aspects of corruption. So that is a suggestion that it may be a cynical attempt by the Israeli Prime Minister to continue it for his own benefit. I'm not saying that's the case, but that's what some people are saying.
Well, similar accusations have been levelled against him for what's going on in Gaza
Yes.
as well, you know, for the inability or what it seems like the unwillingness to actually set out a long-term plan and try and wrap this up, war as quickly up as possible, even though we're seeing mounting pressures from the Americans and particularly the Brits now with our new Foreign Secretary. So it's you know, these are not new allegations, but again, the question is whose interest is it in to keep escalating and to keep using the kind of rhetoric like this is not the end, even though clearly the leader of Hezbollah is saying actually we'd quite like this to be the end.
He also has extreme right elements within his government that he has to appease in order to hold this very fragile coalition together, Netanyahu. So you're right, there are realpolitik elements over and beyond the morality or otherwise of the war. There's Netanyahu's domestic politics may well be coming into play here as well.
Absolutely.
I need you to keep talking because I'm having a fit of coughing here, which is not really what we want during the paper's discussion. To help me with that, James, let's move on to politics and the Express saying Labour has no mandate to axe winter fuel payments.
I think this is a really good story, and it kind of ties in with what we saw in the last session of Parliament when I think 6 left-wing Labour MPs had the whip withdrawn when they voted against Labour's plan to continue the two-child cap on benefits. This plays into the idea that Labour are, you know, Tories in another set of clothes. I'm not saying that's true, but that's what some people on the left of the party are saying. They're going to come under sustained pressure at the TUC conference next month. Motions are being brought in condemning the two-child cap and also this limitation on the winter fuel payments. It's going to be means-tested so that only the poorest pensioners get it. And James Cleverly, who, by the way, is standing to be Tory leader, and I don't blame him for saying this, he's claiming that Labour are betraying the British people. They don't have a democratic mandate to do this.
Which is interesting, because you think like a huge, what is it?
A huge majority would give them
would be the mandate.
He could make up his mandate, Storm.
I'm very curious where he learnt about British democracy.
It wasn't in any manifesto, was it? It wasn't mentioned they were going to do this.
But as Rachel Reeves has said, you know, she walked into her entire skeleton, a horror show that the Tories left, so she didn't realise the state of the country's finances, which is hard to believe because they've been public knowledge for quite a while. I mean, I do find it interesting the language many newspapers are using, axing the winter fuel payments. That's actually not what's happening. They're means testing it.
Yes.
So, you know, this idea that it's just going to vanish off the face of the map is not accurate. And also, you know, a quarter of pensioners do have a net worth of over £1 million. So, I mean, just to contextualise it, but these are scary times. You know, over the last couple of years, we've seen fuel prices go through the roof. And so people are rightly concerned. And, you know, means testing it, the question is, how are you going to do that? So the concerns are not unfounded. It's just the kind of language that's being used. At the end of the day, if the Tories were going to do this, that would be suicidal because we know that over 60s are mainly make up the chunk of their votes. But it's a real gamble that Labour are willing to effectively annoy so many voters in that sort of bloc because they know that actually a lot of their support comes from younger voters and from younger voters that might not necessarily identify with, that feel so hard done by anyway, that they might not identify with the pain of being a pensioner and having that extra support taken away by what could seem arbitrary. If you're going to means test it, okay, what is the limit? Because we know that means testing, the way benefits are means tested is quite strict. How are you going to means test people whose only income is this?
Is it a gamble, though, when it's so early in the Parliament?
People don't forget We also have to remember over 60s are also the most politically active. So yes, Labour's vote are mainly amongst younger voters, but they're not as politically active or engaged as older voters.
Just to finish off before we head to another break, Esther, let's talk about it's another issue for Keir Starmer to think about. The Mail is calling it a sleaze row. This is to do with a pass apparently being given to Lord Wahid Ali, who is a Labour peer, of course, but also a big donor to Labour and seemingly was able to walk in and out of Downing Street in recent weeks easily.
Yes, over £500,000 in donations to the party, and which effectively bought him unfettered access to Number 10. He was able to sit in at meetings in Downing Street at will. And the reason why this has become such a huge story is this uncomfortable relationship between power and politics, that, the average person knows that you can now basically buy access to power regardless of what party you're on. I mean, it stings a little bit more because the Labour Party are always the first to throw stones from glass houses, particularly when the Tories are seen to be guilty of effectively giving people with money access to power. But it's something that you can't avoid. I mean, look at the way lobbying has taken shape in this country. You can effectively buy meetings with government ministers, and it's such an uncomfortable relationship. But if you're going to purge politics of those kinds of stakeholders, how are you going to do it? Because they also have a say. They just happen to have more money to have that say.
Yes, good point. Thank you both for the time being. Coming up, the Church of England's Bishop for Prisons says social media users who stirred up racial hatred during the riots should not be jailed. More on that to come.
You might hear me make a record like Wilson, cause I love summer, no Rachel Wilson. Yes. The winter will come, we just have parties inside, it's still fun. We're jamming, pump this, we're banging. Chase your boyfriend, let's have him. We're rowdy, girls make our judgment cloudy. But when
Well, I think it feels like ADHD is a hot button topic at the moment. The intention wasn't to jump on that wave. I myself have been diagnosed with ADHD twice. The book isn't about the struggles of ADHD or anything like that. It just appeared while I was writing it that the lens I see life through felt like it was representative of that part of my life. And the way I write the book even is quite reminiscent of how my thoughts work, which might be different to other people. Yeah, I wrote it in present tense because I wanted people to come with me on my journey out of, I guess, confusion and into something towards harmony. I hands up, obviously still a work in progress, but I am in a much healthier place than I was during the book, the time I write. I actually barely mention Rizzle Kicks in the book, and I do that on purpose because I wanted the book to centre around my processing of griefs, many griefs. And for me, grief is such a unifying experience. And the only time I really talk about fame or celebrity is just to give people the idea that I had time and money, which can be quite dangerous when somebody is struggling to process an emotion. But ultimately, the book is supposed to be just about that feeling, and grief doesn't care about how famous you are, how many things you own. Heartbreak doesn't look at your average income and then decide how much it's going to hurt you. It hurts everybody, and it's a language everyone speaks, and so that's what I wanted to focus on. Yeah, avoidance is a big one. With I could have maybe chosen addiction or anger, but avoidance I felt encapsulated more of the cultural nuance of battling against our needs to process, because I do believe that we still even glamorise some of the coping mechanisms or non-coping mechanisms, actually, as in like binge drinking or searching for validation elsewhere. That is avoidance. That is an avoidance that I lent into for a long part of my life, and I, decided to try and not do that. It's also a little nod to my attachment style, but that's another thing.
Yeah, well, you explained that.
So the attachment theory is also an outlook on love and how people connect. Mm-hmm. And I was certainly an avoidant person in relationships for a long time.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me now. James Rampton, columnist at The Independent, and writer and broadcaster Esther Kuraku. Let's get straight back to the papers. Let's talk about this story, James, in the Telegraph. Spare keyboard warriors jail for inciting race riots. I think we know what that's all about.
Yes. I mean, first of all, who knew that the Church of England had a bishop for prisons?
I didn't.
No, we were discussing it earlier. I think it's great that they do, but as you say, totally thankless job, because the prisoners maybe hate you. I'm sure the government will hate you. Yeah. Everyone will hate you. Anyway, she has suggested, and it's an interesting line of argument, that you should be trying to rehabilitate so-called keyboard warriors rather than jail them, because they won't learn anything. However, I do think, and I'm generally in favour of rehabilitation, particularly as our prisons are so overcrowded, I do think in this case these riots were so extreme and so shocking that the government really acted very, very efficiently in cracking down on people so quickly. I mean, 2 days after the Southport riots, people were being jailed, and I think it helped to stop them in their tracks.
Yes.
Because, you know, tanked-up idiots were realising, oh, there are consequences for being horrible to the police and throwing rocks at people and trying to burn down hotels. Oh, it's not a consequence-free universe. And they've highlighted one so-called keyboard warrior who said on Facebook that mosques should be blown up with the adults in it.
Yes.
And she was jailed, and I do think that's right.
This is the 50-something woman from Cheshire.
53-year-old woman from Cheshire. And they have... You know, if you say that, you can't think, oh, well, it doesn't matter. No one's going to read it. Millions of people read it. They're amplified endlessly on appalling streams of vitriol and hatred. So I do think people need to learn that if you say something, it has consequences. If you said that to someone's face, you would definitely go to jail because it's inciting racial hatred.
Mike Tyson made a point that the internet has made it too easy to say things without getting punched in the face over it, which is a fair point. I mean, I do.
Certainly for Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
Well, certainly. I mean,
well, don't you think they should all just be visited by Mike Tyson on these offenders? That would shut them up, wouldn't it?
Well,
that's an entirely different proposition.
He's got a lot of visits
himself. Exactly.
He's got to visit 1,000 people or something. Sorry, Esther.
But I do think the bishop has a point because the element of rehabilitation is actually quite critical, because one of the big problems we have with our sort of justice system is recidivism, right? So most of the people that we actually see going to prisons aren't first-time offenders. Exactly. And it's this question of, you know, what are you actually going to get out of it? Yes, punishment is an element, but the whole point of punishment is to allow you to rejoin the society that you're in. No one wants to see this kind of proliferation of racial or just hatred online. But sending people to prison, I mean, people that were actually attacking mosques, actually attacking hotels, that's different. That's criminal and violence. But for people that are posting things online, there is a valid question to how do you get people to stop that kind of behaviour. I'm not sure necessarily putting them in a class like you would for someone getting a speeding ticket and then telling them how naughty they've been is the best way to do it. I don't have the answer for that, but I think she raised a very valid point, which is what exactly are you going to get out of this, especially when our prisons are overcrowded.
Look, when prisons are full, fair enough, but context is everything. And people doing this at a time when the riots seem to be growing and developing is perhaps what led to the courts acting so quickly as a result. Let's talk about, Esther, this story in the Express, the Bank of Mum and Dad home handouts. This is a story about, well, people are still turning to their parents to, well, help them get on in life.
Get by home, and it's reached a record level of £9.2 billion this year. So that's how much.
That's a big old bank, isn't it?
I know. I didn't know Bank of Mum and Dad had that much money. I feel duped.
Yeah, I want a handout from that bank, actually.
Absolutely. But this is just showing, you know, how much support that parents are giving their children trying to get on the property ladder, because it's become so difficult. I mean, you know, in the span of 2 decades, the actual ratio of amount of money or earnings to how much money you can get to get a mortgage has like quadrupled, basically.
Yes.
So where in sort of the 80s and 90s it could be a third or a quarter of your income, now it's, you know, 10 times.
Well, the average salary versus the average house price is from like 10 to 1.
Exactly,
so
which is, and you know, that's increased over just the span of 25 years exponentially. So of course people are relying on mummy and daddy that can help them. The question is, what about people that don't have bank of mummy and daddy? They can just kiss their dream of owning a property goodbye, or kicking the can down the road.
James, are we going to have to go to the Bank of Mum and Dad to borrow money to buy tickets for Oasis next summer?
Definitely. And the Bank of Uncle and Aunt and and granny and granddad and your cousin and your dog as well. I think it's a great story, and they have certainly, laid a trail of breadcrumbs very effectively.
Credit to the Sunday Times, which had it as their exclusive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Mail has got a good angle. Has Knowles' £20 million divorce reunited Oasis? I mean, that's a question. I'm not going to pose any answer to that, but that is a very valid question, I think.
We're fans.
Nothing like a woman taking you to the cleaners to make you realise your dream.
Your dream of reuniting with a brother you haven't spoken to for 15 years.
Exactly. Yes. It's the opposite of Yoko Ono.
But Esther, you're not an Oasis fan.
I couldn't even name one song.
You couldn't? Wonderwall?
No.
Never heard of it?
No.
I think you might enjoy it.
Maybe if I heard it, I would know, but I listen to far more.
The too young thing is not an excuse. You've heard of the Beatles?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So will the reunion happen? Definitely, maybe.
We have been doing that one all evening.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm here all week, but obviously I'm going to be fired.
I hope it does, because so many people are excited online. I would hate for them to be disappointed.
But they're aiming to do, if these rumours are true, 10 nights at Wembley Stadium.
Which you think will sell out?
I think it'll sell out. There are enough sad old gits like myself of that era, yes, who will buy the tickets.
We will see when they go on sale. Thank you for the time being. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, the latest on the tensions in the Middle East as Hezbollah and Israel exchange fire across the Lebanese border. Stay with us for the full story first.